I have one question from Russia, and then I have a question from a Russian diplomat in the United States. In prefacing this Russian question, it comes as a result of blog discussions that went on in Russia during the course of this week based on LaRouche's warning of a new dark age and the need to put the entire system through bankruptcy reorganization. That online debate was identified as one of the top 10 Russian blog discussions on July 30th. It absolutely dominated the internet. The question that was generated by those who participated in that is as follows. Dear Mr. LaRouche, in your speeches, you accused British imperialism, and justly so, as the main opponent of the implementation of your plan for introducing a new monetary system by, for one thing, fixing the exchange rates of national currencies. We think that's a wonderful idea. But the question that has to arise is this: which side of the barricade is official Washington on in this matter? Don't you think it might be a mistake to consider the USA as an ally in this difficult solution? How can the potential of a US veto be overcome in solving this problem, especially since you hold that the problem cannot be solved without the participation of the US? Don't we face a vicious circle?
Well, the answer comes in real history, that if the United States does not change its policy from that of the present president, there's not going to be a civilization, nor a United States either. We have to realize the depth of the problem. That, first of all, that most of the world economy, even though the United States has declined in its power as productive power since the middle of the 1960s, but especially since the closing period of the 1970s. Despite this decline, which has accelerated greatly since 1989, the United States has been the greatest source of credit, directly and indirectly, for the world economy. You see this if you imagine the effect of taking the US dollar and throwing it in the garbage can, and take the effect on China and other countries of a collapse of the dollar, because most of these countries have claims against the US dollar. If the dollar becomes worthless, what are those claims worth? The credit of most countries depends upon those margins of credit, which depend upon stability of the US dollar. The system has been up that way. Recently, you have some nations that have tried to get away from that and say, well, we don't need the dollar anymore. You're crazy. Take the case of China. If the value of the dollar collapses, what happens to the economy of China? If the economy of China collapses, what happens around the world? How many countries depend upon China? How many countries in Europe depend upon the Chinese market? Well, So the problem here is we don't have a choice. We have a choice either of doing it. Now, my view is the United States, the present U.S. government, is not going to survive. Not under Obama. Not under the President Obama policy. We are talking about a general chain reaction collapse of the entire world monetary financial system by about October. A collapse which can result in two ways: in disintegration by the end of August or the beginning of September. You see, everybody knows, of course, now that the system is going to collapse in October. Anyone who is in official positions who says that they don't know that is lying to you, or they're clinically insane. In one case, you've got to ban them from public commerce, and the other place, you've got to put them in an institution where they can be taken care of. So we're not talking about the future. We're saying the Obama administration which is now collapsing in its authority. And the rate of collapse is going to accelerate rapidly. When those folks out there in the various towns and communities and states receive their Washington representative back home, they're going to lynch them or threaten to. At that point, you're going to find the Obama, who has been going into net negative curves at an accelerating rate precisely because of this. You can get some jerk who was a member of Congress to go along with genocide. They got hammered in Washington, and they will actually vote and put their thumbprint on a bill which authorizes genocide against American people. They're doing it. In these committees, they're doing it. These members of Congress are voting for genocide and trying to pretend they're not. But they are. When they get back home, wow, they're going to hide from their constituencies. They're going to retire to a different state where they are not known and cannot be singled out. What are you? Oh, I'm a retired plumber. These guys are not going to be happy campers when they go back for camping season. No. So the point is, we're dealing with a very short-term thing. We're not dealing. The problem is people think academically. We're living in a climate of liberalism. That's known as a disease, in case you didn't know that. And they don't believe in truth. They say, yes, but. Yes, but. We're like two goats saying, yes, but. So they're foolish people. I mean, but politicians are all tied into this gossip, this we know, we agree, we are respectable people, we know how to get along with each other. Right? It's disgusting. It's company manners in the worst kinds of conditions. You know, it's like trying to have company manners, like a Jewish guy trying to have company manners with Adolf Hitler. It just is not. It's not very appetizing. Yeah. So this is the situation. So we're in short term. Events. Oh, let me take one other thing. Let's take it more fundamentally. Most people have no understanding of real politics or real history. And the two lacks of understanding are closely interrelated. That history, as Shelley defines it for culture generally, and as Gottfried Leibniz defined it in the 1690s for science, physical science, is based on a principle which he called dynamis. It's a principle of culture. Now, if you look at yourselves carefully, and if each of you from different nations, for example, out there, look at yourselves in terms of your national context, you will recognize that your opinions are not based on your independent opinion. Very rarely. Very rarely in the course of history of any nation, typical individual act on the basis of individual true judgment. They act on the basis of trying to fit into a standard of culture, a dynamic standard of culture, in which they fit in. Yes, I'm one. I'm this. I believe this. Yes, of course, I agree. Yes, this. Of course, yes. In other words, most people do not think honestly. They think of going along to get along, which is the official motto of the U.S. Congress. Go along to get along. That's morality. We have to go along with our colleagues. And the way they behave in Washington, which enrages their colleagues, and if they had any brains, and some do, is going to enrage their constituency back at home. Intelligent politicians know that what they believe in Washington will get them killed back in the hometown. And so what people operate on is they operate on public opinion, or pubic opinion in some cases. So they operate on that basis, which is, they are not independent thinkers. They call themselves independent thinkers because they're independent of thinking, but that's... But the basic thing, people think of our culture. We think. We think. When you hear somebody say, we think, you know they're not thinking. They're going along with whatever they are trying to express as identifying them. I'm a member of this club. I'm in good standing in this club. I go to this church. What do you believe? Well, I go to this church. Where's your church? I forgot. I mean, it's a big fakery. Only a rare minority of independent thinkers actually exist in any society to date. They're extremely rare. We live in a dynamic system where the relations determine the part, not the part, the relations. It is not the individual opinion who shapes public opinion. It is public opinion or pubic opinion which shapes the individual's opinion. Like taste in sex, for example. Pubic opinion. Exactly, precisely. This is what Shelley points out in the remarkable concluding section, and especially the concluding paragraph of his defense of poetry. There he puts it in a favorable light, saying that many people of his time who agree with this great cultural upsurge of which the United States development was specific, were good, not because they were good themselves, they themselves were not good, but because the culture or the cultural influence which influenced their environment caused them to respond positively to good things, to good values. But on the other hand, when the tide turned, as under the impact of the Napoleonic Wars and so forth, when the tide turned, then the great period of culture in Europe, which coincided with the American Revolution, suddenly was reversed. Suddenly all these nations which had admired the American Revolution and supported it and made its success possible had shifted into the other direction through the impact of the French Revolution and its horrors and things that followed. So you find there tides in the course of history. The secret of all great classical drama is that don't play too much emphasis on independent opinion. People who talk about independent opinion, they usually disgust me because they're not honest. They don't have any independent opinion. They are appendages of somebody else's opinion. And we're in that kind of period. We're now in a period where the members of Congress behave like idiots in the main, except for Republicans who find it opportune not to be Democrats. A Republican is a person who doesn't want to be lynched as a Democrat. It's what's happening these days. So you have these moods that swing, and people say they're thinking independently. We think, we think, we think. We think is often groupthink or gropethink. It's not real. So we're now in a time where with the population out there, to which these traitors to humanity are attached, the representatives, are enraged at what they see happening in Washington. In Washington, the representatives are controlled by the social environment of Washington. They're controlled by groupthink or gropethink. When they get back home, suddenly they're in a different environment. Their constituency wants to lynch them. So this is the reality. It's the reality of revolutions. It's the reality of war. It's the reality of politics on a grand scale. Individual opinion is much overrated as a force in history. And its durability is also highly overrated. People change, like Peter, thrice. And that's the way it happens. So now we're in a period where the existing system of the world, what was deemed inevitable yesterday, and people are still thinking of it as inevitable. How do we deal with this inevitable trend? It's not inevitable, buddy. When you see that over 1/3 of the U.S. households in this country are threatened with death as a result of the policies, the economic policies, let alone the healthcare policies of this president, how much longer do you think he's going to stay in office? You're headed for this moment, this coming autumn, this late summer, for the greatest upheaval in known history in one form or the other. Either we change the policies and get out of this mess, or you're going to see the darkest of dark ages ever recorded. Under these circumstances, you can expect that some people may arise to the occasion. And among people in leading positions in Russia and China and India and some other smaller countries, I suspect that very soon the common contempt for the current President of the United States is going to cause a lot of people to do very serious rethinking. I'm playing and devoting everything in my commitment to what is needed now. I'm acting on what is needed now. Because if what I'm going to do and doing doesn't work, don't ask me about the result.